Look under the bed. Check the closet. Look in all the dark corners of your apartment. And don't laugh. Even if you don't believe in monsters that live in the dark, that doesn't mean they don't exist. I didn't believe it either. Another 4 days ago. And now I do not turn off the light anywhere and ever. Especially at night. Especially when I'm alone. It all started with a letter neatly packaged in a black envelope and dropped into my mailbox. The letter carried the news of my grandmother's death. I will talk about her later. Now it is worth saying that I lead a nocturnal lifestyle, in connection with the nature of my activity. I work as an administrator in a nightclub. And I found that letter only on Monday evening, after I returned from work and had a good night's sleep. A copy of the will was also attached to the letter, in which it was said about the apartment that belonged to me from that moment on. The apartment was relatively close. Thus, now I had to visit a place where I had not been since my childhood. And no, when I held the black envelope in my hand, I didn't regret it. There was no sad thought in my head about how quickly time is running out, that maybe I should come more often, etc. At that time, I already knew that my grandmother had died and, moreover, I was at her funeral. This letter made me rather bewildered. Because my grandmother died already 2 weeks ago and there was no will with her then. Well, I decided to go and see the apartment. I needed to find out what condition she was in order to plan further actions. I was thinking that it is possible to make a modern renovation and rent it out. In extreme cases, sell it as is. It was necessary to estimate the amount of work to be done, and it was better to do it now, while there is time. After 3 hours, I was already standing on the threshold and twirling a long key in a creaking keyhole, waiting for a portion of a pungent and unpleasant pharmacy smell, which, in my experience, accompanied any dwelling in which an elderly person was in charge. When I opened the door, to my surprise, I did not smell any special aromas. Only a barely noticeable cold breeze washed over my face and hands as I took a step into the apartment. Turning on the light, I began to glance around the rooms. Everything was like in childhood. Old Soviet furniture, a radio on legs, a non-working TV, a buzzing refrigerator, and rags hung in the kitchen. There was a feeling that the grandmother just went to the store for bread. There was just one odd detail that stood out to me. All cupboards, or rather, all the cracks in the cabinet doors, were sealed with newspapers so that it was impossible to open them without damaging the so-called packaging. And almost all had holes, as if someone was poking a finger, trying to make a hole in the newspaper to look into it. It seemed very strange to me, but I still decided not to focus on it. You never know what cockroaches can settle in the head of an old person. Looking out the window, I saw the moon hanging motionlessly in the black sky, which with all its appearance hinted at me to spend the night in this apartment. In addition, on the kitchen table stood, familiar to me from childhood, a sugar bowl filled to the brim. And next to it lay an open and half-empty pack of tea. This served as the minimum for making a decision. I went to my car and brought my laptop. After a bit of scrolling through the news feed on the network under a cup of soporific tea, I began to get ready for bed. I didn't make the bed. I decided to lie down in my pants and t-shirt directly on the bedspread, only I brought a softer pillow from another room. I put on my favorite series and quietly began to fall into a dream. Being already half asleep, I heard a sound, similar to the muffled sound of a bursting bubble wrap, in which especially fragile things are sometimes wrapped. Rare claps, over and over again, became louder. I did not pay attention to them until such a bang, already quite distinctly, was heard 2 meters from me. I opened my eyes, paused the series, lay down and listened. Everything is quiet. No sounds of strangers, no rustles, no movement. I lay like that for about 20 minutes. I already began to think that it was strange. As soon as I closed my eyes, I immediately feel as if someone is looking at me from the darkness. It didn't feel so comfortable. I got up, turned on the light. It seemed to feel better. I lay back. I lie with my eyes closed, but I can't sleep. I lay like that all night, and only fell asleep in the morning. I woke up for dinner and immediately decided to get down to business. I drank tea, began to collect rubbish in the trash. All sorts of rags. This box from the time of dinosaurs, half a bag of newspapers, flower pots, and all kinds of cans. In general, I collected everything that was not nailed into the hallway. I think I need to check the cabinets. I began to open them. I didn't find anything out of the ordinary there. Mostly books and linens. While enduring everything, it was already getting dark again. I washed the floors, drove the dust, went to the store, drank tea, looked at the clock. It was already 11:30 at night. Well, I think I'll stay one more night, and in the morning I'll go home. I began to fall asleep. I make the bed, and out of the corner of my eye I see in the doorway as if something has moved. I looked. There is nothing. A minute has not passed, as sounds were heard from another room, as if someone was walking there. I hold my breath. I lie listening. And as luck would have it, deathly silence. It is not clear whether it seemed or not. And again, I close my eyes. It feels like someone is looking at me. I open my eyes. There is no one. I felt uncomfortable and, frankly, scared. Then, honestly, I began to smile. I lie down and think to myself, damn it, a healthy forehead. But I was frightened of some rustles. To reassure myself out loud then I said, Kozio would go away from here, while I'm kind. He smiled and closed his eyes. And to me from the darkness, from the side of the closet ajar, the voice then answers, I'm not Kozio. From this phrase, my blood froze in my veins, and my body pressed down to the bed with an anvil. I lie down and can't move. I try to scream, it doesn't work. I look, and from the slit of the closet an eye is looking at me. From such a picture I was already shaking. I was lying and I could not breathe. Suddenly, the phone lit up on the pedestal next to me and this eye darted somewhere to the side. It was like I was released for a second. I jumped out of bed, immediately to the switch. I click and the light does not light up. I'm on the phone. I put a candle on the chandelier with a screen. There are no bulbs. In 2 jumps I run out to the kitchen. I click. It also does not light up. And I see something sitting under the table, sitting and moving. She is black, hairy, her face is terrible, she looks like a bat, and she looks at me. I was paralyzed again. Goosebumps run down the back of the head, chills run down the back from the legs. I stand and I can't move in horror. I don't know how long I stood there, it seemed to me like an eternity. Then my phone alarm went off. I twitched in surprise and this creature went somewhere. He looked away for a second, but she was gone. Here I could not stand it and yelled at the top of my lungs. While yelling, he convulsively pounded on the phone screen trying to turn on the flashlight. A moment later, a bright white light illuminated the dark kitchen. Without much delay, I ran to the front door. I pressed my back against it. I myself turned a candle towards the corridor, and with the other hand I tried to find the key. And the hand slips in the air where it should have caught on the key sticking out of the well. From this feeling of hopelessness, my legs buckled, my heart is pounding, I want to scream, but I can't. I have a lump in my throat. I stayed like that in a stupor for 3 minutes. And he seemed to be starting to calm down. This creature is not visible. I think, since the door is closed, I will jump out of the window. 3rd floor. Dangerous of course, but still better than waiting for this evil spirits to crawl out after me. I ran to the window. I open it. I look down. Hi. And before I had time to climb onto the windowsill, I feel something cold touch my leg, and how it pulls me back into the room. I dropped the phone from my hands, flew off to the bed myself. I jumped on it, took out a lighter from my pocket. I stand, my hands are shaking, the light is dancing. And I see a hairy hand crawling out from under the bed. The fingers are thin, unnaturally long, and instead of nails, claws are bestial. And it reaches up to my feet. I began to pray out loud. I was only baptized in church, and I never really believed in God. I saw how prayers are read only in films. However, that didn't stop me then. I began to chatter no worse than any fanatic. My Heavenly Father, save, save, help, Lord Almighty, deliver us from evil and save us from the evil one. And from under the bed this vile voice says, it will not help, and grabs by the legs, trying to pull. I hold a lighter with one hand, I try to be baptized with the other. And then someone started banging on the door. I was alive inside. For me, this roar is like a lifeline. And the voice of a man from the stairs shouts, "Hey, why are you yelling there?" And I answered him, "Break the door, break it." I hear the roar became stronger, I probably heard it. A few seconds later the door flew off its hinges and the corridor of the apartment was illuminated by the yellow light of a lamp that hung in the entrance. I instantly jumped into the opening and ran straight over the chips and the broken door to the landing. There was a strong man of about 40 years old, in sweatpants, a t-shirt and slippers. Seeing my agility, he immediately stepped aside so as not to disturb me. He caught my hand when I almost sat on the splits. Instantly analyzing the situation, he pushed me through the open door of his apartment, quickly followed, pushed the latch and leaned against the peephole. It all happened so fast that I didn't have time to understand anything. Just now I was standing on the bed surrounded by a roar with a lighter in my hands, and now I am sitting on my ass in the hallway of a neighboring apartment in complete silence. The man stood like that for another minute, and then turned and demanded an explanation from me. For a long time he could not make out my incoherent speech, until I drank half a bottle of vodka, almost in one gulp. After, I still managed to tell him something like everything. And of course he didn't believe me. But honestly, I don't blame him. Because I myself still do not fully believe in what is happening. I made one phone call from him and by lunchtime, dead drunk, I was taken to my rented apartment. What happened next, how I lay down, and how I undressed, I don't remember. I opened my eyes. It was dark outside. Most likely I slept all day and half of the night. The first thing I went to the sink to drink and wash. But as soon as I bent over her, I nearly fainted. An eye peered out at me from the sink drain. That ugly eye. Everything around started spinning and swimming. I turned to face the center of the kitchen, leaning on the table to steady myself, and my heart froze. Long black fingers protruded from all the dark crevices. They scraped everything they could reach, arching from one side to the other. The sight shook me and I fell in the middle of the kitchen, right under the chandelier. My whole body went numb. It seemed I could only move my eyes and lips. I began to pray again. Whisper under your breath in a barely audible hoarse voice, "My Heavenly Father, do not leave me, hide me from evil and save me." And from the shell that disgusting, screeching with madness screamed, "It won't help. It won't help. I've exhausted the old woman. I'll exhaust you." I lay like this until dawn. With the first rays of the sun in the window, everything was quiet. The first thing after I got up, I began to foam all the cracks in the house with mounting foam. When the foam was over, I began to seal them with paper, and where there was an opportunity, I nailed everything on nails and screwed it with self-tapping screws. The whole first half of the day was spent on closing the cracks. When I ran out of something, I just took another material and continued, trying not to waste a minute. Then I went shopping and with all the money I got powerful flashlights, a whole package of batteries, spearlight bulbs and several crosses. I arranged everything in such a way that not a single dark corner and not a single room remained in the apartment where there would not be a cross. With the onset of darkness, the apartment was plunged into absolute silence. Not a single rustle or knock, creak, or rattle. Nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing. It seemed like I could even sleep. I went to the bathroom sink and put a bucket in it, because the drain was foamy too. He took a toothbrush, moistened it a little with water and squeezed a strip of toothpaste onto it. Next I opened my mouth and raised the brush to the level of my chin. when I suddenly froze in horror. There was something long and black in the reflection. It stuck out from the depths of my throat and scraped with long claws.